YouTube. What's going on, everybody? Northeast Ohio. Here for some more NBA market chit chat. So today, what I wanted to do is talk about um, how the NBA offseason moves have, in my opinion, negatively impacted some players. So, recently we've been talking about, oh, so and so is going up, such and such is going up. Oh, this move made this guy go up. Trey Young going nuts. Suns guys going nuts because they got Chris Paul. But we haven't really talked about the other side. How have these moves, or have any of these moves, negatively impacted some players? And I think a couple of these are fairly obvious. But a lot of people don't think about that side because they're so focused on the green charts going up and the bars going to the right and going up and their, collection value getting higher, et cetera, et cetera. So, I went through some stuff and pulled out 5 guys that I personally think, were negatively impacted from the last 10 days or so of NBA business. And I'm not talking about guys that got injured. I'm not putting Klay Thompson on this list. That doesn't make any sense. Like I said, some of these guys are going to be fairly obvious. Some aren't. Real quick before we get into that, YouTube nonsense down below. Like, comment, sub. The links to market movers are down there, which is the tools that we always use on the channel, and a coupon code. But I wanted to say, have a nice Thanksgiving, everybody. I probably won't do a video between now and Sunday's week in review unless something pops into my brain. But I think I'm going to take a few days off here. Not that we can really do anything because it's 2020, but just kind of relax for a little bit to get caught up on some stuff. And everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving. If you're watching this pre-Thanksgiving, be careful if you are watching this pre-Thanksgiving or post-Thanksgiving. It's 2020. It's a wild world out there. Be safe regardless of what you're doing. So, YouTube nonsense down below, and let's get into some shenanigans. So, first off the bat, and once again, this one to me is fairly obvious. That is good old, and I'm not so much going to care too much about what these guys' prices have done to this point. Not all these guys are drastically trending down or anything. But I just think these moves are bad for the long term. So this is a little more speculative than in a lot of my videos that you guys watch. Typically, I use data to back up whatever it is that we're talking about. In this case, we're going on a little bit more speculative side of things, for kind of what I think will happen. And in some cases, these prices are already starting to trend down because, like I said, I believe it's fairly obvious. So, sorry for that little diatribe. First up, Jackson Hayes. They traded for Steven Adams, and then they doubled down and gave him a contract extension. If you were heavily invested into Jackson Hayes, aka Sideshow Bob, this is all bad. You're not having a good week. I don't think Jackson Hayes is a player you should have been investing in the first place, period. Most big men just do not do well. That's neither here nor there. But yeah, Steven Adams is there now. He's signed a 2-year extension. He's going to be there for at least 3 years. At best, if nothing happens to Steven Adams, Jackson Hayes is a 20-minute per game role player. Now, can you have value in that as a team? Yes. Can you have value in that from a sports card side of things? Not so much. Not in my opinion, anyways. Especially as a big guy that your claim to fame, isn't really like throwing up 30 points a night. So, bad news if you're into him. And we'll kind of talk at the end about what we think we should do with these guys in regards to holding or not. Ash, just talk about that now. For Jackson Hayes, I honestly think I would probably sell whatever I had, as long as I wasn't upside down on it. And maybe you look at it and read the landscape. And honestly, now that I'm talking about this, if I had a Jackson Hayes position, which I don't, so I'm not in this, not forced to make this decision myself. If I had bought Jackson Hayes on the cheap and I could get any sort of profit on it, I think I would just sell. Because here's the thing. You might say, well, X, Y, or Z could happen. Sure. Maybe he develops into a really good player. But now with the Steven Adams trade and the extension, you're looking at it probably at least 3 years, assuming nothing bad happens to Steven Adams. Do you really want to be holding Jackson Hayes stuff for 3 years? There's probably something better you could be doing with that money. And it's not like Jackson Hayes is some big high flyer guy that you were paying, $500 for a silver prism raw or whatever. But depending on your situation, or if you had a little stash of them or whatever, it might now just be best to cut your losses and move them, and maybe hope you locked in a little bit of profit. And that's probably going to be the case for most of these guys, other than maybe two guys that I can think of off the top of my head from the guys on this list. Next, Cam Reddish. And we're going to basically talk about these two guys together. The other one's DeAndre Hunter. Yes, the Hawks have loaded up on guys. However, I just don't see how these two guys get on the court other than, sixth, seventh, fifth, or sixth, seventh guys off the bench. Actually, probably like eighth or ninth guys off the bench. You got Young, you got Bogdan, you got Danilo, you got John Collins, and you got Clint Capella. Then coming off the bench, you have Chris Dunn and Rajon Rondo. And then you get into Reddish and Hunter, and then you got the guy that they drafted playing the four. Regardless, I just don't know if there's going to be a lot of playing time for these guys. Now, I wasn't super huge on DeAndre Hunter to begin with, personally. Cam Reddish, I would probably be more willing to sit on and see what happens. And I don't know in either one of these cases if you need to rush out the door to sell them. But I just don't see a path, especially for Hunter, to really get on the court much. I don't know. Maybe it's there, but I don't know. He didn't neither one of them. Reddish had some flashes. I guess they both had some flashes last year, but just in general, the moves that the Hawks made, while good for the Hawks, I don't think are very good for these two individual players. Depending on your situation, you may want to move off of them because once again, they could have value in the future, but how long are you willing to sit and tie the money up into those cards, especially if you've already made a profit on them? If you bought Cam Reddish, let's say raw for a few bucks, and you sent him in to get graded by PSA, and you could turn a nice profit on that. Maybe you just lock that in and move on to the next thing. So everyone's individual situation is going to be different, but the general take here is that I don't think this was a good week for Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter card investments, essentially. To be holding those guys right now is not going to feel very good. I had Reddish and Hunter in a certain pile. I have my rookies separated into two different boxes. There's the guys that are potentially, basically what it comes down to, it's the guys that I put in top loaders versus the guys that just go in penny sleeves. Reddish and Hunter for me in my storage box were top loader guys. I think they're penny sleeve guys now to kind of break it down that way. But I don't have a lot invested into them other than what I pack pulled. I did not go out and buy Reddish and Hunter. But of the two, I would be much more willing to ride this out with Cam Reddish than I would DeAndre Hunter. But once again, everyone's situation is different. Next, and this one could flip depending on how they end up playing, but I'm not big on this guy to begin with. So the LaMelo drafting on top of this, that's Devonte Graham. And this one is a little bit more, definitely more speculative than some of the other ones because we really don't know how the situation is going to shake out yet. My gut tells me LaMelo is going to start and he's going to play a lot. So then it comes down to Scary Terry or Devonte Graham. What do they want to do there? My guess is it would be Graham starting and Scary Terry coming off the bench, but I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows. And I have not honestly dug into the situation that much yet. I just know that I don't necessarily like this for Devonte Graham. And I was not high on him to begin with, partially due to his age. He did not come out very young. He was like one of those, I'm the oldest rookie in the class type guys, which I generally don't like those guys to begin with. So just the drafting of LaMelo, I think is going to hurt him. I could be wrong. They just traded for Gordon Hayward. PJ Washington's there, who's, whatever. Um, but I would definitely not be actively going out and buying Devonte Graham. I would probably, if I had a bunch of Devonte Graham, I would probably look to see how it sounds like it's going to play out early in the season. And if it looks like the LaMelo thing is greatly going to impact him, I would probably look to move off of him very quickly. Once again, I don't know each one of your individual situations, but you know, mileage may vary. But my perspective on this is I would not want to be holding DG deep into this season because I think LaMelo is going to have a negative impact on his value. I could be wrong. Like I said, this is definitely more speculative and not data driven compared to the normal conversations that we have. And the last one is out of this list is the one that I would be willing to hold long term because of his age, kind of the opposite of Devonte Graham, and that's Sekou. So the Pistons kind of pistoned and they went out and signed a bunch of random dudes like Jeremy Grant for $20 million. I mean, Jeremy Grant's a good player, but I don't know that he's a $20 million a year player, and I don't know that he is a $20 million a year player for the Pistons. For the Nuggets, it's a little bit of a different story. For the Pistons, and the main reason he said he went there was for playing time. So I understand Sekou and Killian Hayes are like best buds and all, but it sounds like they're not going to be on the court very much based off of what I've dug into to this point. And the Pistons, I don't know what they were doing with free agency. They're the one team that everyone's like, huh? So long story short, I don't see him getting a ton of playing time early this season. And I think that's going to negatively impact his value. However, I'm intrigued by his upside, the flashes that he showed last year. Now, personally, I don't have a ton of Sekou, just what I pulled out of some Mosaic and some Optic. I don't even think I own a Sekou Prism, but I definitely have some Optic and Mosaic of him. Nothing graded, nothing high end. So for Sekou, I basically have no cost basis into him. So personally, I'm willing to just kind of shove him into the box and kind of forget about him for a year or two and see what happens. If you were heavily invested into him and you don't want to tie the money up for that long, I just think he became much more of a longer term play. I think initially people were hoping that he was going to get a bunch of playing time right out of the gate because they're rebuilding, and now that does not seem to be the case. I think he still gets playing time, but I don't think it's going to be till the second half of the year when they're out of playoff contention, or quote unquote playoff contention. I would argue they're out of playoff contention before the season even starts, but you know what I mean. So I'm still intrigued by Sekou. I would not run and fire sale Sekou, but the Pistons moves were not good news for Sekou for like an immediate return on his stuff. He's become a much more long-term hold. And once again, his stuff's pretty cheap if you're just talking about base prisms. And in fact, there may be a good buying opportunity on Sekou in the early part of the season if you're a believer. He's not getting playing time. He's getting 10 to 12 minutes a night or whatever. Because remember, I believe he is still only 19 years old. He may be 20 now, but I think he's only 19 still to start the season anyway. So he could be a very, very long-term hold. And he did show flashes last year. The market went nuts when he showed flashes and then immediately cratered. He was kind of the first of the overreactionary market guys before that stuff really started trending in that direction. Back around Christmas, actually. I think it was in mid-December when he went on his little mini run. Maybe it was January, but either way. So Sekou's the last one on the list. I just was not, as someone that had some Sekou that was looking to move it potentially early in the season. I think that those plans get moved to the back burner now. So he's the last on the list. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. If there's anyone you think I missed, let me know down below. I try to went through most of the teams and the moves to figure out who gets negatively impacted on this. A side note, I think the Spurs not like full blowing it up, like trading DeMar and trading LaMarcus Aldridge and stuff like that, is hits to like Keldon Johnson, um, to Lonnie Walker. Like I think those guys still get a lot of playing time. I'm still very intrigued by those. But I was really hoping that they were just going to say, like, you know what, we're just full blown blowing it up and trade DeRozan, trade LaMarcus, and like let all these young dudes play. DeJounte Murray, Derek White, like, you know, just unleash the young squad and see what happens. And that doesn't seem like it's going to happen unless, you know, they're out of the playoff picture, which they probably will be. Though they played well at the end of last year, who knows? And maybe they move those guys at the deadline and those are second half plays. I'm still intrigued by a lot of the young Pistons guys, but I was kind of hoping that a path to playing time would open up there via them moving some of those vets, and that just did not happen. So, kind of an honorary mention, we'll call that. But anyway, that's all I have for you guys. We will catch you guys on the next one, most likely Sunday morning, unless something catches my eye. Everyone have a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving, and we will see you later. Peace.